All right, so our discussion does start in Portugal, and I want to pull this map up without focusing too much on all the other stuff. We'll get there. And just say that Portugal is this little area you see right here in orange on the Iberian Peninsula, which is made up of Spain, which would be the bigger of these countries, the olive colored one, and Portugal, which is the orange colored country. But it would make sense geographically that this would start in Portugal because you can see Portugal is the westernmost point of Europe. And they were closest to Africa. And we're going to see that at Prince Henry the Navigator's School, starting in 1420, before Constantinople had even been conquered, there is a movement. There's a group of educated scholars working on maps, on wind patterns, a new style of boats, um, and trying to make their way down Africa. Now, this little part of Africa here, historically, has been the only part of Africa that the Europeans knew about. And understand that this huge chunk of Africa is the Sahara Desert. So the Europeans basically knew about northern Africa, but not much further down other than this kind of deserty area. And right here are a group of islands. And the Europeans had the hardest time getting around these groups of islands, largely because the topography, the elevation of the sea beneath the sea level varied greatly. So if you went along the coast, you would feel like you're going pretty smooth, and then all of a sudden, crash, you would hit a rock. And oftentimes this was thought of as a shipwreck destination, that if you went this way with your ship, you were going to crash. Okay? But the Europeans, the Portuguese especially, started saying, well, look, what if we went out wider a little bit and went around these islands using their new ship, the Caravel, and their new type of sail, which was triangular. They found a way to tack out towards sea a little bit before they cut back. And the Portuguese were the first Europeans to round the Cape of Good Hope, is what it was called, and start settling and trading with the people of this part of Africa. This part of Africa is largely known as West Africa. And we can see here on this map that the Portuguese started setting up trading bases all along this area. And year by year, voyage by voyage, they would get further down and further down and further down until eventually they would get down to the very, very tip of Africa. So let's take a look, if you guys don't mind, at a map with a lot of the dates of this Portuguese exploration. And again, you can see here, Portuguese 1431, trying to sail down beneath these first set of islands, the Canary Islands. I correct myself, it is the Canary Islands. Getting down here, 1444, around Cape Verde Islands. 1460, they make it down to this part of West Africa. It was 1434. Even 1419, you can see that they had gone out to some of these islands here. Again, getting off the coast. The Azores are these beautiful paradise islands out here that the Portuguese control. And finally, you see that 1487, Bartholomew Diaz is going to land all the way down here past modern day Congo. He's going to round the tip of Good Hope, which I mistakenly called the Canary Islands. And then you see him turn around. He goes, oh my gosh, there's more over here. Let's go tell people. And he turns around and he comes back. And eventually we're going to see that in 1497, a guy named Vasco da Gama will be the first European to completely round the tip of Great Hope. He comes all the way up to East Africa, to a city called Mombasa, and then he will cross and he will be the first European to make it to India. He makes it to Calcutta in 1498. Now, just as some perspective, okay, Columbus sailed his journey setting off from Spain in 1492. So all of this was happening around the same time. Speaking of the Spanish, let's come back to this map. Let's come back to my PowerPoint. So Spain, newly united Spain under King Ferdinand and Queen Isabel, it is now going to set off on its own explorations. Portugal was an early leader in the age of exploration. We just talked about 50 years before the Spanish were attempting to explore the world. The Portuguese were claiming land in Africa and came all the way up to India, to the city of Calcutta in 1498, where they got spices. A lot of these spices were able to be purchased from India. So now we have Vasco da Gama coming back to Europe with a boatload of spices, and he sells it in Europe and he makes a ton of cash. Remember, each time on the land journey that the spice would trade hands from trader to trader, they would increase the price. Gosh, my brother and sister, they worked in retail during college. And I remember them saying that there was a 3 times markup, a 300% markup, that what they could get the stuff for in the shop was 3 times less than what they sold it for. So like something that cost $7, they would sell for 21. I mean, markup in these stores is huge. And the same was true back then. Each time an item passed hands from trader to trader, the cost would go up dramatically. So the Portuguese are now living large. They visit southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula, even up into the area around modern day Iran or Iraq. But Spain, okay, in 1492, newly unified Spain, but I digress, gave Christopher Columbus 3 ships, okay, and the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, right? And he sails off this way. Now, Europeans at this point, specifically the educated Europeans in Prince Henry the Navigator's school, knew the world was round, but they didn't, their measurements were off. Okay, they saw the world being round, but they're not being big enough to take into consideration the land that is the Americas. They thought that where the Americas are is where China would be. And just as a fun fact, the Pacific Ocean is the biggest ocean in the world. Between Japan and California is bigger than between New York and Spain. It's a huge ocean, which isn't really reflected well in this or many maps. So he reaches the Americas in 1492. We think he sees some Asia. He calls the peoples that he met Indians because he thought that he had found India. And he actually makes 4 journeys. He never even realizes he had found new land. The entire time, he thinks that he is dealing with people from India or the Indies. Maybe he thought he was dealing with islanders. But he had discovered the Americas. And of course, everywhere the Spanish and the Portuguese go, they plant their flag and they claim that land for their country. So you can see here that the area of modern day Mexico, California, Arizona, New Mexico, parts of Colorado, Utah, Central America, huge chunks of South America were claimed by the Spanish. That the Portuguese claimed land all around Africa. They really just set up trading cities more than anything. So anyways, we're seeing here that the Spanish are not only claiming land in the Americas, Ferdinand Magellan leaves from Spain, goes all the way around South America, stops off in the Philippines, where he meets a great warrior named Lapu Lapu. And they fight to the death, and Ferdinand dies in this battle, but the Spanish soldiers win. So the Spanish soldiers take the Philippines, and then they go home without Ferdinand Magellan, who had died in battle. And they tell the king in Spain, hey, we got you some land over here as well in the southeast islands of the Pacific. We talk about the Treaty of Tordesillas, where the Pope actually, the Pope gets involved, since these are 2 Catholic countries, and he goes, look, let's just draw a line right here, okay? And everything to this side of the line is Spain's, and everything to this side of the line is Portugal. Well, Portugal showed up in Brazil and said, hey, this is on our side of the line. We're going to take it. And they do. That's why in Brazil they speak Portuguese today. And also it allowed Portugal to have all of the land here in Africa, India. These are the islands of and let's take this opportunity to take a closer look at it. So the Portuguese claimed land around Africa, over into the area of the Arabian Peninsula, Persia, India, and down here into the East Indies. And what are they doing there? They're trading for spices. So while the Spanish are running around and they're getting land in the Americas where they're getting gold, they're getting silver, they're not really starting plantations as much as we see the English and the French later do. And the Portuguese are out here just making money. And we're going to see that, and I like to look at it sometimes this way, that, okay, so the 13 and 1400s, these are kind of the Venetians' centuries. The Venetians are the leading traders in Europe, and they are rich. And we know that Renaissance starts in Italy. Well, also in the 1400s, the Portuguese become rich and powerful, because of course money always equals power. It still does. But starting in 1492 and really in the 1500s, Spain will take over as economic leaders, as one of the more powerful, if not the most powerful group in Europe. The 1500s are Spain's century. And it's largely because of this age of exploration.